I spent 23 minutes holding the receipt. It wasn't even crumpled. It was perfectly flat, placed with intention between page 137 and 138 of her copy of The Artist's Way, a book she pretended to be inspired by. She hadn't touched it in 4 months. That's why I noticed it. 6 inches long. $64. 98. 2 people. 1 wine. A dessert I can't pronounce. Timestamp. Thursday, 9:44 p.m. Location, a restaurant she told me closed permanently during COVID. I counted backward. Thursday, 9:44 p.m. I was in the living room, watching a documentary about invasive snails. She said she was visiting her sister. Her sister who called me 2 hours earlier asking if Nadine was home yet. So no, she wasn't at her sister's. She was at Port Vine. With someone. This is the part where a normal man loses his mind. I didn't. I just sat on the couch with the receipt, my fingertips going numb, staring at those numbers like they were coordinates to the crash site of my dignity. You have to understand something. I'm not a bold man. I don't have the kind of spine that demands explanations or throws phones against walls. My name is Clint, and I apologize when I get interrupted. So I did what I always do when my gut tells me something awful. I made tea. Chamomile. No honey. Then I waited. She came home at 10:12. Keys jingling. Humming a tune that didn't exist. She smelled like fig and somebody else's cologne. She didn't see me sitting in the dark. Didn't expect to. I watched her take off her heels like a dancer who'd just left the stage. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She flipped it face down without checking it. Long drive? I asked. Her entire body jolted. She turned around like I was a stranger who broke into the house and just complimented her shoes. Oh, Clint. Geez, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark? I lifted the receipt. Didn't say a word. Her smile broke. Not cracked. Broke. Like it realized it was useless here. She walked toward me slowly, already building a story in her head. I could see it forming in her eyes, like clouds gathering before a storm. She opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. Have fun on your date. That shut her up. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she did something I'll never forget. She exhaled through her nose, like she was disappointed in me. Not sorry. Not ashamed. Annoyed. Like I had ruined something precious by catching her too early. That's when I realized I was the side character in my own marriage. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't explain. She reached for the receipt, slowly, like it was hers. I pulled it away. You left it in the book, I said. Page 137. She shrugged. Said nothing. And just like that, silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful. The kind that screams in your ears until your own heartbeat sounds like a betrayal. This wasn't the moment our marriage ended. This was the moment I realized she ended it weeks ago and just forgot to tell me. I didn't sleep that night. She went to bed around 11, like nothing happened, after brushing her teeth with the same humming tune she'd come home with. No explanation. No breakdown. She kissed me on the cheek with those same lying lips and said, "You're being dramatic, Clint." I stood there in the hallway, receipt still in my hand, my fingers shaking like I'd just held a live wire. She closed the bedroom door gently behind her. No slam. No tension. Just soft, measured quiet, like she was putting the night to bed and not our entire marriage. I spent the next 4 hours on the couch staring at nothing. My mind didn't race. It just looped. Replayed everything she'd said to me in the past 3 months. Every client dinner, she mentioned. Every time she left her phone in her purse, but face down. Every new perfume she claimed a coworker let her try. The time she came back from errands with no bags and wet hair. I used to think I was paranoid. Sensitive. Needy. She made me feel that way. Like my suspicions were symptoms of a broken man who didn't know how to love a strong woman. Now I see the truth. I wasn't paranoid. I was being conditioned. And she was a damn artist. Around 3:10 a.m., I opened her laptop. We both knew each other's passwords. We had nothing to hide. Or at least, I didn't. The screen lit up, and I swear it almost growled at me. Like the machine itself knew I was about to find something that couldn't be unseen. No incriminating emails. No scandalous browser history. She wasn't that careless. But she had forgotten one thing. Calendar entries. Not on her work calendar. That was squeaky clean. But her personal Google Calendar? Full of vague little placeholders like wine study, sketch class, and the one that froze my blood, Foxglove. Repeating weekly, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Foxglove? I Googled it. It's not a flower. Well, it is, but not in this context. In this city, Foxglove is a high-end, members-only bar downtown, the kind of place that doesn't advertise. No walk-ins. You don't even know it's there unless you've been invited. And guess what? It's located inside the same building listed on the restaurant receipt I found hours earlier. Of course. So while I was rewatching documentaries about marine life and eating microwave noodles, she was sipping $22 cocktails behind velvet curtains with someone who probably wore cufflinks and called her babe without irony. I shut the laptop. Hard. That's when the tears came. Not loud, ugly sobs. Just quiet, involuntary ones. The kind where your body cries before your mind catches up. Like some deeper part of you is grieving something your heart hasn't admitted yet. I sat in the dark until the sun came up. She came downstairs at 7:14 a.m., yawning and tying her hair into a bun. "Hey," she said, like she hadn't detonated a bomb in my chest the night before. "You want eggs?" Eggs? I almost laughed. I should have laughed. Instead, I stood up and whispered something I didn't even know I was going to say until it left my mouth. "Who is he?" That was it. Just 3 words. But the room turned cold instantly. She didn't flinch. She blinked once, then smiled. Not warmly, but like a teacher correcting a dumb student. "You need help, Clint," she said, pulling a frying pan out from the cabinet. "I can't do this paranoid sh*t with you every time I go somewhere." I stepped closer. I wasn't angry. I was numb. "Foxglove," I said. "Every Thursday. 7:30. And that did it. The first real crack. Her eyes widened. Just slightly. Her hands paused. And then came the worst part. She smiled again. But this one? It was different. This one said, "You're too late." She didn't deny it. She didn't even pretend to ask what I meant. Instead, she looked at me like I'd just interrupted a very long play, one she'd been performing flawlessly for months. And then she said, "Okay." Just that. One word. "Okay." What the hell does "okay" mean in this context? Does it mean yes? Does it mean she's done pretending? Does it mean she's been waiting for me to finally piece it all together so she could stop acting? I stood there in my pajamas, bare feet cold on the tile, holding back whatever fragile pieces of my self-respect were still clinging to the bottom of my ribs. And she just went on making eggs. Like I wasn't even real anymore. By the time she handed me a plate of scrambled eggs, I couldn't even look at her. My stomach was a fist. My hands were sweating, even though the kitchen was freezing. The smell of breakfast made me nauseous. She sat down across from me, calmly buttering her toast like we were still pretending to be husband and wife. It was almost impressive how effortlessly she returned to her routine, as if my confrontation hadn't even scratched the surface. I sat there in silence, watching her chew with total indifference, and I realized something that made my skin crawl. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't even embarrassed. She was comfortable, like a con artist who knows the mark is too spineless to report the scam. Like she'd already done the math and figured I wasn't worth the trouble of lying to anymore. And in a way, she was right. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table or demand names. I just sat there, stunned, shrinking, disappearing inside myself. And she finished her eggs. "You're not going to ask who?" she said casually, dabbing her lips with a napkin. That's how I knew she was testing me. She wanted to see what version of Clint I'd be today, the one who begged or the one who broke. I swallowed hard. "It doesn't matter who," I said. "I think I already know." That was a lie. I had no idea. I had suspicions, sure. Maybe someone from her yoga studio. Or a high-end client. Someone with enough charm and money to make her feel like her life with me was a phase she'd grown out of. But the truth is, I didn't care about who anymore. What destroyed me was the realization that she had carved out an entire hidden world just beyond my peripheral vision. And she'd kept it running while we shared coffee, cleaned the garage, talked about refinancing, like a magician pulling rabbits from a hat while the audience claps, blind to the trapdoor under the stage. "You're not angry?" she asked. I looked up at her then, for the first time since she sat down, and saw something horrifying in her eyes. Curiosity. She genuinely wanted to know what I would do. Like this was some kind of emotional lab experiment, and she was the scientist watching me twitch under the microscope. "I'm tired," I replied. "And I want the truth. That's it." She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. She tapped one finger against the table, a slow, deliberate rhythm. There's nothing to confess, she said finally. Because it's over. Over. Yes. It wasn't a relationship. It was a mistake. And it's done. I stared at her for what felt like a full minute, waiting for something. Anything that sounded human. An apology. A shred of regret. A flicker of the person I used to love. But all I got was that flat, managerial tone. Like she was closing a file and moving on to the next task. So that's it. I asked. You cheat. You lie. And then you declare it over like you get to erase it? She didn't flinch. I didn't lie. I omitted. And I'm not proud of it. But Clint, come on. Look at us. This isn't working. We've both known that. There it was. The ultimate betrayal wrapped in a gaslight. She took my heartbreak and tried to turn it into a mutual failure, as if I had also been slipping out at night, kissing strangers behind locked doors, checking into private lounges under fake names. But I hadn't. I'd been here. Every night. Waiting. Believing. Fixing her charger cords and unclogging the sink and listening to her stories about real estate nightmares like they were war reports. I had stayed. And she had left. She just forgot to pack a bag. She stood up and cleared the table. Just like that. No drama. No tears. She rinsed the dishes and opened her laptop as if we hadn't just torn open the ugliest part of our lives. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text. She glanced at it and flipped it over again. I stared at the screen. It lit up a second time. She noticed. You don't get to look, she said sharply, her voice the coldest I've ever heard it. And in that moment, I realized something worse than the betrayal itself. She still cared more about protecting him than fixing this. That's when I knew the affair wasn't over. It never ended. It was just evolving, changing masks, changing times, maybe changing names, but still breathing, still alive, still taking up space in her life where I used to live. I walked out of the kitchen, not because I forgave her, but because I needed to be somewhere she wasn't. I sat in the laundry room for almost an hour, just listening to the quiet hum of the dryer, trying to remember what it felt like to have a mind that wasn't haunted. And when I finally stood up and walked back into the hallway, I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. Her voice. Soft. Urgent. On the phone. She was saying, he knows. I froze the moment I heard her voice. Not because she was speaking, but because of how she was speaking. It was hushed but sharp, like she was holding the phone too close and clenching her jaw between every word. I didn't catch the beginning. I only heard 3 words. He knows now. Every sound in the house stopped meaning anything after that. The hum of the fridge. The ticking clock. My own breathing. None of it registered. I stood in the hallway like I was made of glass, one hand still on the laundry room doorframe, terrified that even the creak of the floorboards would let her know I was listening. Her voice was clearer now. No, I didn't tell him. He figured it out on his own. Pause. No, I didn't say your name. Jesus, calm down. The silence that followed was louder than anything she'd said. I couldn't hear the person on the other end, but I could feel him. His presence in our home, even through a phone line, made my skin crawl. He was part of this house now, invisible but rooted. A ghost she invited in while I was busy paying the mortgage. Then she said something that didn't just hurt. It humiliated me in a way I hadn't felt since childhood. I don't think he has it in him, she whispered. He's not the type. He'll mope, maybe cry a little, but that's it. I backed away from the hallway like it had teeth. I didn't want to hear more. I couldn't. My ears were ringing. My throat felt like sandpaper. I walked straight into the bathroom, turned on the sink, and stared at my own reflection, wondering how the hell I'd let myself become a man so easily dismissed. He'll mope. Maybe cry. That's it. She wasn't wrong. By noon, I was still pacing the backyard like a prisoner doing laps. I tried to talk to myself out loud, to get a grip on the tornado ripping through my chest, but every sentence sounded pathetic. She's not who you thought she was. You need to leave. You deserve better. All lies. I didn't believe any of it. Because here's the truth. You don't just stop loving someone because they betray you. That's the cruelest part. Your mind knows the damage is permanent, but your heart still clings to the ruins like there's a door back in. I thought about confronting her again. I rehearsed different versions of what I'd say. Calm versions. Explosive ones. Somewhere I asked her to fight for me, and somewhere I threw my ring in the trash and walked out like a movie character with backbone. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I walked back into the house, sat at the dining room table, and did the most pathetic thing I've done in years. I Googled, How to fix a marriage after an affair when your wife won't admit it. Click, click, scroll. Do you know what the internet told me? You can't. At least, not alone. Not when one person is still living in a lie and the other is drowning in truth. Not when the cheater holds all the power because the betrayed is too emotionally bankrupt to walk away. That's what I was now, emotionally bankrupt. And she was cashing the last checks. Later that evening, we sat in the same room and said absolutely nothing to each other. I sat on the couch, fake watching some show on Netflix while she curled up in the armchair with her laptop open, probably checking listings or responding to clients. Or him. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't check it, just glanced down, locked the screen, and went back to typing. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't hiding the affair anymore. She didn't have to. She knew I wouldn't leave. Not yet. She knew I was still trying to understand what went wrong, like it could somehow be fixed with the right sentence or some breakthrough moment in therapy. But that wasn't coming. Because the worst kind of betrayal isn't the one that explodes. It's the one that rots slowly, quietly, right in front of you, until the smell becomes so normal you forget you're living in decay. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did something worse. I started imagining her with him. In that bar. At that table. In some expensive hotel room with mood lighting and overpriced sheets. I imagined her laughing. Really laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. I imagined her texting him while I sat 3 feet away on the couch. Her fingers flying across the screen while I asked if she wanted to order Thai or Italian. And then, I imagined something I never thought I would. Her being relieved when I finally leave. That's when I started planning. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Something else. Something quieter. I started writing everything down. Dates. Times. What she said. What I overheard. Names I saw flash on her phone. Her calendar entries. Screen brightness changes. Gaps in her location history. The wine stain on her blouse that didn't match anything we had at home. If she was going to erase me, I'd make damn sure she couldn't rewrite the story. Because even if I was too weak to stop it, I wasn't going to let her make me the villain. I didn't sleep that night either, second night in a row. Not because of heartbreak. That was already calcified, somewhere deep in my chest. It wasn't pain anymore. It was strategy. Something had shifted in me. Something cold. At 3:40 a.m., while Nadine slept soundly in the room we used to make plans in, I was sitting in my car, parked down the street under a busted street lamp, watching our own house like a stranger casing the place. I had a notebook in my lap. A real one. Paper. No digital trail. She thought I was soft. She thought I'd fall apart. She thought the worst I'd do was cry into a pillow and beg for her love, like some sad rescue dog. She didn't know I'd flip. Not in the way she expected, not some explosion or confrontation. I didn't storm into the bedroom demanding names. I didn't destroy her things or post about her online like some betrayed teenager. No, I made a decision instead. If she was going to lie so elegantly, so efficiently, so fearlessly, then I was going to document her performance like the audience she never knew she had. I started tracking her behavior. That morning, she left the house at 8:15 a.m. She wore the blue blazer I hadn't seen in over a year, the one she used to call her closer. Full makeup, perfume, not the usual kind, something heavier, richer. It clung to the walls after she left like it wanted me to choke on it. She said she was showing a property in Redmond. I checked her calendar. Nothing blocked. No address. No client name. No time slot. Just Redmond showing. So I followed her. Yes, I followed my wife. The same woman who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. The woman I bought earrings for last Christmas because she mentioned them once in July. That woman. I followed her like a stranger. Like a detective. Like someone who had finally admitted that trust wasn't coming back. She didn't drive to Redmond. She drove downtown. Circles the block once. Parks underground at an office plaza. I waited. She didn't come out for 45 minutes. When she did, she was walking next to a man I didn't recognize. Tall. Tan blazer. Polished shoes. Laughing at something she said like they were old lovers or new ones trying to hide how fast it happened. I didn't take a photo. I didn't need to. The image branded itself into my memory with horrifying clarity. And here's the part that should have broken me, but didn't. She looked happy. Not guilty. Not stressed. Happy. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen on her face in over a year. The kind that used to belong to me. I stayed in the car. I didn't confront her. I didn't even cry. I just watched them walk side by side toward an elevator I couldn't access, and I wrote down the time, the date, the outfit, the man's jacket color. I was done being her husband. I was now her witness. Back home, she returned around 4 p.m. She brought me coffee from my favorite shop like nothing happened. Handed it to me with a kiss on the cheek that felt like someone else's lips. I took the cup and nodded, pretending not to notice the faint scent of hotel shampoo mixed with her perfume. She asked about my day. I lied. She lied. We both acted. Two actors in the world's most emotionally bankrupt sitcom. Anything good on tonight? She asked. I said no. But I recorded her screen when she got on her laptop. I had quietly installed an open-source screen capture tool 2 weeks earlier. Not because I expected anything, but because I'd seen enough how I caught my spouse cheating threads to know what real paranoia sounded like. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was preservation. She chatted with someone in a browser tab I hadn't seen before. Some client portal with encrypted chat features, probably for the elite buyers she worked with. Except this conversation wasn't about property. It was about logistics. Next Thursday. Usual place. Can't wait. Bring that thing again, smiling face with horns. I paused the video. I read it 5 more times. That emoji. That little red-faced devil. That was the moment the last thread of denial snapped in my head like a wire under tension. She wasn't confused. She wasn't vulnerable. She wasn't lured into a mistake. She was orchestrating it. That night, I slept in the guest room. She didn't ask why, didn't knock, didn't text. She didn't care. And I realized something even worse than betrayal, indifference. She had stopped pretending to love me, not because I confronted her, but because she no longer needed my permission to erase me. She had already started writing the version of the story she would tell her friends, her parents, maybe even him. The version where I was distant, where I gave up first, where she just had to do what she had to do. But she didn't know I had receipts. She didn't know I was documenting every scene of this slow-motion train wreck. And if she ever tried to rewrite the past, I'd be ready. Because love is fragile, but the truth keeps records. The funny thing about catching someone in a lie is how quickly the power shifts. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in tiny, silent ways. You start to watch the liar differently. You listen for their pauses, you memorize their tells, and every word out of their mouth becomes data. It's not about the emotion anymore. It's about pattern recognition. I had crossed that line. I wasn't her husband anymore, at least not in the way she understood the role. I was studying her, watching her like a scientist observes a lab rat, waiting to see how it navigates a maze it thinks it knows by heart. The thing was, I had built a second maze inside hers, and she hadn't noticed. Not yet. The next Thursday, yes, that Thursday, I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I had already gotten what I wanted. I let her go, let her dress up in her lies and spray on the same perfume she thought disguised her sins. I kissed her goodbye. I even opened the door for her like some loyal golden retriever of a man, and she smiled that sugary, manipulative smile that once melted me. Not anymore. I watched her walk down the driveway like someone walking into their own trap. I wasn't interested in chasing anymore. I had a different idea. I wanted her to prove she was a liar, with confidence, with flair, with full performance. I wanted to look her in the eye and watch her choose deceit, just to feel what it was like. Not heartbreak, not disappointment. Something colder, something final. So, the moment she left, I went into our shared office and opened her desk drawer. It took 3 seconds to find it. A hotel loyalty card, neatly tucked inside an unmarked white envelope. The kind of envelope you don't throw away, but don't want anyone to see. She was a minimalist. Clean surfaces, tidy digital footprint, no clutter. So this wasn't an accident. It was from the same hotel chain where that secret elevator had taken her a week earlier. She was a rewards member. She had stayed more than once. I flipped the card over. There was a name written in faded ink. Not hers. Not mine. Colin. No last name. No initials. Just Colin. And underneath it, a date. March 3rd. That was the day she told me she had food poisoning and stayed at her sister's apartment. And I had made her soup. And left it by the door. And texted her, "I love you," even though she never replied. I sat back in the chair and let the silence settle into my lungs like smoke. My entire life was now in 2 piles. Things I thought were real and things she edited while I wasn't looking. That night, when she came back, I greeted her like usual. Asked her how the Redmond client went. She sighed dramatically, rubbed her feet, and told me the house was a total bust. She leaned in and said the words I was waiting for. God, I missed you today. I smiled, not because I believed her, but because I knew she didn't blink when she said it. She was too far gone, and I finally saw it. I started laying groundwork, not for revenge, but for escape. Quiet, strategic escape. I didn't want to be the man who begged his wife to love him again. I didn't want to be the cautionary Reddit thread. I wanted to leave like a ghost after I had what I needed. I visited a storage unit 2 towns over, paid for 6 months in advance. I started moving things slowly. Sentimental things first, photos she'd forgotten about, letters she'd never read, the hardcover books she gave me before she stopped knowing who I was. I transferred important files to a cloud backup she didn't have access to. I called my cousin, the one who lived 2 states over and never asked questions, and asked if he had a spare room. He said yes before I explained anything. You finally leaving her? He asked. I didn't answer, but he knew. Over the next week, she grew bolder. Or maybe just sloppier. She started texting more often when I was in the room. She never used names. Just emojis. A champagne glass. A flame. Once a fox. Subtle. Childish. But she smiled at her screen in a way that made me feel like furniture. I watched her. Never said a word. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. She sat across from me at dinner. A plate of roasted salmon between us. Candles lit, like some rebooted version of us from years ago. And she said, casually, with the softest voice, "You've been distant lately. Everything okay?" I almost laughed. Right there. I almost broke the game. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned forward, locked eyes with her, and asked, "Would you tell me if you were seeing someone else?" She blinked. Just once. Then she tilted her head and gave me a wounded expression. "Why would you even ask that?" she whispered. "No reason," I said. "Just curious." She reached across the table and took my hand. It felt like a stranger's hand. Cold. Soft. Weightless. "Of course not," she said. "Clint, I would never do that to you." She squeezed my fingers gently. And in that moment, something inside me shattered, but not in the way she thought. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't angry. I was done. Not emotional. Not reactive. Done. I nodded slowly, smiled back at her, and kissed the back of her hand. Because now I knew. She wasn't just lying. She was willing to lie with love in her eyes. By the time I decided to erase her from my life, I no longer felt hatred. That would have been easier. Hatred has heat. Hatred gives you something to push against. What I felt was colder than that, like watching someone you love float out into the ocean and realizing you don't want to swim after them anymore. She didn't know I had a plan. That was the beauty of it. She thought she still had control. She believed I was emotionally paralyzed, still orbiting her, still weighing my worth against her approval. She didn't see that I had quietly stopped orbiting entirely. I wasn't in her solar system anymore. I had already set fire to my trajectory. Everything I did after that dinner was surgical. I started with the bank. Quietly opened a new account in a separate institution. No shared login. No alerts. I rerouted my direct deposit from work. Told Nadine that HR was updating their payroll software. A lie so boring and procedural, she didn't even blink. She nodded, poured another glass of wine, and went back to texting whoever was keeping her nights interesting. Then I made copies of everything. Every legal document, every receipt, every insurance policy. I didn't want revenge. I wanted leverage. Clean leverage. Something she couldn't spin. I scanned and stored it all in the encrypted cloud folder I created 3 weeks ago, one she didn't know existed. A copy also lived on a flash drive I taped to the underside of the 3rd drawer in my workbench. The next move was the camera. Not hidden. Not secret. A motion-activated cam disguised as a wall charger in the corner of our bedroom. Just in case she ever got bold enough to bring her lies into our bed while I was away. I didn't expect her to. She was careful, but careful people get sloppy when they think they've won. I wasn't taking chances. I documented everything. Her absences. Her texts. Her lies. Even the way she staggered the times she left and came home. Like a criminal trying not to leave a pattern, but unintentionally building one anyway. Every detail I wrote down. Not because I planned to use it in court. Not yet. But because she had rewritten the narrative for so long, I needed a copy of the original. I wasn't angry. I was just tired of being a character in her fiction. One night, I watched her fall asleep. Not in a creepy way, but in the kind of way you watch someone you used to know deeply, wondering when exactly they became a stranger wearing your wife's skin. She was snoring lightly. Her phone was face down beside her. I picked it up, slowly, carefully, heart calm. I already knew the passcode. It hadn't changed in 5 years. I didn't even go through her texts this time. I went to her notes app, and there it was. A draft, untitled. A list. What I'll say if he finds out. We were already drifting apart. It didn't mean anything. You weren't present for me emotionally. You got lazy. I got lonely. You'll never understand how hard it's been to carry us both. And then, at the bottom, no number, no bullet, just a sentence. Don't cry unless he cries first. That was the moment my hands started shaking. Not out of rage, not even out of shock, but because of how calculated it was. She had rehearsed this, prepared her damage control, built an emotional script to weaponize in case the truth ever reached daylight. I stared at that final line. Don't cry unless he cries first, for 10 full minutes. I whispered it out loud just to hear how it sounded. I imagined her practicing it in the mirror, rehearsing her tears, crafting the perfect expression of shattered innocence. And I realized she never feared losing me. She only feared looking bad when it happened. That was her real love, her image. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I deleted the draft. Not to protect her, to disarm her. Because when the time came, when I finally walked away and left her scrambling for a narrative, she wouldn't have a script. She'd have to improvise. She'd have to be real. And the truth is, I don't think she remembers how. The next morning, she made pancakes, sang along to a playlist while the batter sizzled, kissed me on the shoulder, said I seemed lighter. I smiled, told her the fresh air had been helping. She said we should take a trip soon, maybe try to reconnect. Her tone was warm, playful, like we hadn't been playing psychological chess for weeks. I said I'd love that, and I meant it, because when that trip happens, the last trip, it'll be her who gets left at the terminal. No note, no warning, just absence. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. The last morning of our marriage didn't feel cinematic. There was no storm, no suitcase by the door, no dramatic, we need to talk. The sun came in slow through the blinds, same as always. The neighbor's dog barked at nothing. She brewed coffee she didn't drink. Everything looked the same, and that's what made it perfect. She was in the bathroom, curling her lashes, talking on speakerphone to someone she called babe, just a little too casually. Her voice was syrupy. She didn't even close the door. She didn't know I was awake, or maybe she didn't care. I just lay there, listening, not sad, not angry, just still. I had already moved the last of my things 2 days earlier. She never noticed. I had packed in stages, 3 boxes in the trunk on a fake grocery run, 4 more hidden in the garage, and moved after she left for a yoga class she never actually went to. She was so deep in her world. She didn't see the pieces of me vanishing from hers. I left the ring on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. No note, no explanation. Just that simple silver band we picked out together when we thought love was enough. I hoped she'd find it while rinsing fruit or cleaning a wine glass after one of her Thursday nights. I hoped she'd pause, really pause, and realize what it meant. But I didn't need her to. I got in my car, drove 2 towns over, and pulled into the driveway of a rental house that smelled like new paint and fresh beginnings. My cousin had left the key under the mat, just like he said. Inside, there was a half-inflated air mattress, a cheap desk, and a stack of takeout menus. It was the most beautiful room I'd ever seen. For the first few days, I didn't speak much. I took long walks, ate badly, slept too little. I let my brain thaw out from the fog it had lived in for over a year. I didn't reach out to anyone except my cousin. I didn't stalk her socials. Didn't check to see if she noticed I was gone. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to know. My story wasn't hers anymore. Weeks passed. I started seeing a therapist, a soft-spoken guy named Lowell who wore earth-toned sweaters and asked hard questions without making them feel like knives. I told him everything. The receipt, the note, the lies, the game I played in silence. He didn't call me weak. He called me exhausted. And that felt more honest. I got a new job, nothing flashy, just tech support at a local college. The students were loud and the coffee was terrible, but no one lied to me there. No one smiled while hiding daggers behind their teeth. One day after work, I walked into a bookstore I hadn't planned to visit. I picked up a novel about a guy who goes off-grid after heartbreak and builds a life around tree houses and trail maps. I smiled, not because I related to it, but because it was the first time I picked something out just for me. And that's when I met her. The cashier. No dramatic music. No love at first sight. Just a girl with messy hair, mismatched socks, and the kind of laugh that sounded like she meant it. She asked if I wanted a receipt. I said no. She smiled and said, "I never do either." It wasn't a spark. It wasn't a sign. But it was a moment. A clean one. Sometimes I think about Nadine. Not with bitterness. Not with longing. Just curiosity. I wonder if she ever tells the truth now. I wonder if she found someone who doesn't need to be lied to. I wonder if she ever looks in the mirror and realizes I was already gone long before the door ever closed. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. I think about tomorrow. About who I'm becoming. About how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fight for someone to stay. It's choosing to leave before you forget who you are.